Hello, it's Will Glasgow, the Australia's North Asia correspondent, coming to you from Beijing. Now, the Prime Minister and his visiting entourage have flown back to Australia, so that leaves me once again as the only Australian correspondent from Australian media based in China. Now, next month it'll be 1 year since I returned, with that ending Beijing's almost 4-year blacklisting of Australian media. And since I've been back, I've been asked, quite understandably, what it's been like. Why did the Chinese pick me? And what was I thinking saying yes? Now, I'd been in Beijing before. I was based here for the first half of 2020, and in between my postings here, I was in Taipei for 3 years, living, frankly, a much easier life, reporting from China from offshore. I actually was resigned with that move to Taipei that I would never be based in China again. I thought maybe I'd come in for short-term trips following a prime minister or a minister, something like that. But I thought on the whole, that probably being based here would be for someone else, for my successor at the paper. In 2022, I got the opportunity to come to Beijing for the Winter Olympics, and that was a visa that I was given by the International Olympic Committee. So, Beijing had the possibility to make a big fuss and deny it, but they didn't. It was approved, and I got to come in here. And on that trip, even in the confines of the COVID bubble, it was clear to me that not being here, not being in the country, came at a cost to my reporting. I was missing the kind of things you can only pick up by being in the country, all the texture, all the conversations you can have directly with people that just aren't possible to do remotely. Now, by 2023, the Australia-China relationship had improved a lot. By the end of 2023, the Prime Minister was on a trip in China, and I got to come in and follow him around on that. And earlier in that year, I'd been to China as an attendee at the Australia-China high-level dialogue in Beijing. And on both of those trips, it was really clear to me again that I was missing a lot from not being here. And for all the hassles, I thought, it's looking like the risks are low enough, they're still considerable, but low enough that it's worth exploring the possibility of a longer full-time return to China to report again. Now, again, I sort of thought that would be for someone else. I was surprised when the Chinese government at the start of 2024, I got a call from someone at the Chinese embassy who I'd liaised on with the short-term visas. I was surprised when they said, put your application in for a long-term visa. I thought still, we'll see if this comes through. Maybe this is part of the theatre of looking like the diplomatic relations are improving. But again, to my surprise, just before Premier Li's visit in mid-2024, I was told, it's there for you. Come into the Chinese Visa Centre and you can get your long-term visa to go to China. Now, it wasn't that simple. The company had to run our own internal risk assessment on whether we should say yes to that and how we would measure that risk. And that was in concert with and informed by assessments we did with the Australian government, with the Department of Foreign Affairs. We'd done a similar thing ahead of all the short-term trips I'd done into China before that point. But this time the stakes are higher. Being based here comes with additional risks that aren't there on those short-term trips. Now, our view ultimately was that we should do it. It wasn't without risk. We knew that other Australian media were not going to go first. They were waiting for someone else to do it. But my view was, look, after a lot of conversations, including with former and current international China correspondents, I thought we had to do it. It was an opportunity worth exploring for our reporting. And of course, if we decided it wasn't worth it, we could always end it. Well, I've been back for almost a year now, and I'm of the view that in the current environment, it definitely makes sense to be here. I think that there's a depth to the reporting you can do from here that just isn't possible remotely. And it was really underscored to me during the Prime Minister's visit last week. I was not confined by the PM's itinerary like every other following journalist was. Before he arrived, knowing that iron ore and green iron ore was going to be a big part of the agenda, I'd gone off to Tangshan to do a reporting assignment at the biggest port in the north of China where Australian iron ore comes in, one of the real hubs of the heavy industry and steel sector here. Now, the PM and the entourage following him, for all the talk about the industry in Shanghai in a 5-star hotel, they didn't get anywhere near the actual heavy industry itself. So that's the kind of thing that by being here without the constraints of a short-term visa and an itinerary someone else writes for you. It's the kind of thing you can do, and I've been able to do that throughout the year. And also, following the Prime Minister around, it wasn't my first time at any of these places, unlike as it was for many of the following journalists. You know, I've been, of course, to Beijing and to Shanghai and Chengdu many times, but also to much more of China, 15 of its 22 provinces, and I know that those 3 cities are very unrepresentative. Frankly, the parts of those cities, even that the Prime Minister was in, are very unrepresentative. They are wealthy bubbles within 3 of China's wealthiest cities, and the itinerary was essentially confined to that, plus a VIP experience on the Great Wall, which again is not how most people experience the Great Wall. Most people don't have the thing closed down for them when they go in there. So it just meant I was able to be aware that, put into better context where we were going, and, you know, to hear praise for China's development, some of it well warranted. I also know that most of China doesn't look like the China that was beamed back to many Australians last week. I mean, just after the PM left, I got on a fast train and went to the neighbouring province, to Sichuan, where he flew out of, where Chengdu's the capital. I went down to Guizhou. Now, that's one of China's poorest provinces. And frankly, to go there is almost like going to another country. It's ground zero for a lot of white elephant infrastructure projects. In 2023, there was a huge debt bubble, and a lot of projects there remain unfinished, and I could see that as soon as I came off the train. I mean, I often, as I travel around China, I'm stunned by how many unfinished buildings there are on the outskirts of cities, particularly second, third, fourth, and fifth tier cities, ones that the Prime Minister didn't have on his itinerary. And even having seen a lot of those, the amount I saw in Guiyang, the capital of Guizhou, was pretty incredible. Now, that's not to deny that there's been huge development in even that province and in that city in the last 10 years. There has, but the standard of living in that part of China, and frankly in most of China, is so much below what the Prime Minister and the visiting journalists saw. So look, I'm of the view that it's a good thing to be based here, and I can add value by being here. I hope that by the time the Prime Minister visits again, there are more than just one Australian correspondent based here. I think it would add to the depth of Australia's coverage of China. But of course, we have to keep reassessing the risks. I say that in this current environment, that I think it's worth being here. Of course, if the bilateral relationship deteriorates again, I'd change my mind likely. I mean, I'll follow the assessment, but I think it's quite likely that we would have to leave again. I mean, as my friend Chung Lei's experience in 2020, which continued for more than 3 years, shows, the Chinese state is willing to get very ugly with journalists. They can use them as hostage targets. So if there's a breakdown, we'd have to reassess the risks, of course. But for now, I think it makes sense to keep being here, so I'll keep doing my reporting from China. It's Will Glasgow, the Australia's North Asia correspondent, coming to you from Beijing.